Okay, fabulous artists. Today I'm going to show you how I got the effects that you see in this painting. This painting was done a number of years ago, so it's not a demo of this painting, but it's going to be a demo that shows you how I used solvent reduction to get these kind of effects. So it's important and to start with, or I should say it's much easier to start with a very dry panel. So if you have a panel with some layers of cold wax on it and a little bit of texture that's very, very dry, that's perfect to start with. I then brayer a relatively thin layer. All of my layers are going to be pretty thin on this because we're going to use several layers as we go. And as you can see, I'm going light on top of dark. You want to have that dry panel that you start with. You want colors on that that you want to end up with in your final painting. There'll be additional colors as from ones that we're brayering on in the process, but we will definitely be going back to some of those colors. So make sure whatever panel you start with are the colors that you want to have show up, some of them at least, in the final painting. So I'm working kind of here from dark to light. So the colors on that original dried panel were relatively dark in value. And then I put a lighter layer on. And we're going to do that alternatively a couple times in this process. You can do it more than a couple times, but in this particular demo, I think I do it 2 or 3 times. What I'm doing here now is just putting pure solvent on the painting. So on top of those layers I just brayered on, I'm painting with just odorless mineral spirits, and I am painting the shape of the figure that I want with a clean brush. The brush is getting a little bit dirty as I go because it's picking up the paint that I just brayered on, but it's basically just solvent and a clean brush and painting the outline and the shape, including the inside of it, of the figure that I'm going to want at the end of this process. And here I'm putting on, or just painting a second figure. So there's going to be 2 figures, just very similar to the original painting that I showed you at the beginning. So you can see I'm very loose. I'm not trying to be exact at all. There's not a lot of detail here. I'm just getting in the basic shape of the figures and the basic kind of gesture that I want. Very, very loose because we're going to be doing this multiple times. We're going to be taking this off with a squeegee. So then I just run a squeegee over that solvent that I just put on, and I'm wiping away to reveal the beginnings of a figure. Again, you can see it's very inexact right now. The legs are kind of fat and aren't quite there yet, and the head's too big. It's not an exact form of art here at all. It's very, very loose. We will tighten it up as we go, but we want to stay loose as long as possible. So we're going to remove a little bit more of the paint, that top layer I put on, revealing that dry painting that we started with. Now I'm going to go ahead and brayer over another color, and I'm putting this particular color right on top of the figure where I was working. You could do it all over the canvas if you wanted to, or the panel, but right now I'm just doing it right where the figure is. So I did a layer of green because I wanted to add some of that in, and now a layer of a cream off-white. Just smoothing it down there a bit with the squeegee. I didn't take anything off, I just smoothed the finish there a little bit. And now I'm going to take off again. So what this is a process of putting paint on, removing it, putting paint on, removing it. And in doing that, you get these remnants of each layer, and you get this interesting effects like you saw in that first painting that reveal the paint beneath, but also keep some of the layers that you're adding. And each time you do this, each time you wipe away, the figure's going to change a little bit and morph a little bit. We're not trying to make it exactly the same. I'm making the same gesture. I'm just repainting it over and over, but I'm not being at all exact about it. The legs will be a little different each time, the figure a little different, and that's okay. It actually, what that does is it can give, in the in particular this instance, because these are figures walking, it can actually help with the feeling of movement. And if you are doing this with a seated figure, it can do the same thing. It can give a sense of the figure may have adjusted a little bit in the chair, or it may have started out a little bit over here and then kind of morphed to kind of just like, oh, on the iPhone when you take a live photo and you see just a little bit of the movement of a photograph. So I like that that feeling of maybe movement, or the figure isn't locked into the position that you're painting it. It again helps with that feeling of more abstractness and a more looser feel of the figure. So as you can see, I brayered over it one more time, not worrying about if that color gets on the background, so to speak, or the negative space. And it's again kind of putting on, taking off, putting on, taking off. And surprises happen. I don't always know. I certainly don't know where these colors are that I started with on that dry panel. Not exactly. I don't know exactly where the dark is, or the green, or the turquoise. But as I reveal it, I begin to see that. As I pull the layers of paint on top off with the solvent, I then reveal what that dry panel colors had. And as you can see, I am leaving some of the paint. I'm not entirely pulling off every single bit of paint. You don't want to do that. You want to leave some of the new layers, some of the new wet layers on there, or I should say remnants of them, or pieces of them. So the intention isn't to pull off every single bit from the solvent. It's to kind of start to merge that dried panel underneath with your new layers, and have a nice combination of the two, some being revealed, some being a little bit masked, but definitely cohesive together. Again, don't worry about anything being too perfect as you go. It's okay if the leg's too fat, at least at some point. If you want to slim it down, you'll be able to, as you'll see. Or maybe it's better to have legs be a little more abstracted and not too perfect. What you're not seeing, which is kind of off camera here, is every time I'm painting on that solvent with that brush, I'm very frequently wiping the brush off afterwards, because it will pick up the new fresh layers and then become a dirty brush, or a brush with paint on it. And we really want to mostly be working with solvent. Some paint is fine, very much so, but not too much, or then you're actually painting as opposed to pulling the paint off. So there are paper towels involved here for certain, and I am trying to keep that brush relatively clean. Now, the longer you leave the solvent on your paint, the more it kind of eats away through the layers. If that paint underneath is very dry, very, very dry, it's not going to, it's going to be challenging to take that off. It's possible that it could go through to that and go deeper, but if it's really quite dry, as you can see here, it's not doing that at all, or at least not very much if it is. I'm pretty much thinking it did not do that. Um, so, but the longer you leave it on there, the more it will go through. So if you were working on a painting like this and at the end of your session you decided that you still weren't finished and you wanted to continue on it tomorrow, it would be very easy to do that. Your paint the next day would probably be tacky, and even if it is semi-dry or it's closer to that, you will definitely be able to go back just like this. And be able to go back in your layers with the solvent. So you don't have to finish this in one sitting. I'm now going over with darker paint. I did want some value change in that background. Not as dark as the original painting that I showed you, but a darker value nonetheless. And as you do this, it's okay if you run through the figure some. I'm painting around them a bit, but I will be running through it as you see because the brayer's bigger. You'll see there's actually a little resist where the solvent was. It actually resisted and didn't let, as I brayered through, it didn't really paint over that part as much. But I encourage you to let the tools kind of overlap like that. Don't try to be too perfect with how you cut around the figure because again, bringing that paint into the figure kind of ties this together color-wise and can make some interesting effects and also can keep the painting nice and loose. So you will need to decide what's important in an abstracted figurative piece like this. What parts do you want to clarify and feel like that you're drawing some attention to or that are really important in illustrating the gesture and the mood of the piece? And what parts of the painting might have more lost edges or areas of a little bit less clarity, but still lend to the painting so that it reads. So that is always a balancing act of what you want to have maybe harder edges or be more clear in terms of what you're representing, and some areas that are a little more left to the viewer's imagination and a little bit more ambiguous. That is an oil bar I'm using there, probably RNF, to bring a little more color to a kind of an imposed horizon line. And just to bring a little color zing, a little complementary color in of the orange to the blue. And that was a little, actually, very much what I was just describing in that I wanted a little bit more clarity on the edge of that dress and where it began and ended. And that's why I put that, brayered that lighter paint there and then got a kind of a nice edge at the bottom and the back to clarify where that dress began and ended a little bit more. Again, here I'm getting a little bit more detail on the leg. You'll see that at the close-up at the end. how the leg is a little bit more visible there. And same with the arms and the shoulder. You'll also notice how I am working kind of the whole painting. I'll go from one part of one figure to a different part of the other figure, to the background, to the legs, to the foreground. And that is certainly how I work, and I would advise you to do the same so that you are working the whole painting at once and not get too detailed with any one area as best you can. Obviously, sometimes we need to pay a little more attention to some kind of detail, but for the most part, work the painting all around and don't get too caught up in one detail for too long. And this is close to the end of the painting where I'm just looking at just small touches of possibly adding a little bit more color around, or and checking values as well, color and values. So I wanted to redefine, reshape those legs just a little bit there at the bottom. And so the way I did that was actually to paint over them and then to solvent reduce to pull off to get a little more accurate shape of what I wanted in the painting. And here you can see a close-up of how the textures and the layers show through using the solvent reduction technique to create figures. So I hope you enjoyed this demo, and I am going to show you actually a handful of other paintings that I have used this solvent technique with, just so you get a sense of the different kinds of things you can do. These are different color palettes, and you can see the layers and the leftover and sort of the accidents and intentions and wonderful mistakes and surprises that come out with using solvent reduction. Again, I hope you enjoyed this. If you want to learn more, please go to melindacuzzona.com. I have a whole class on cold wax and techniques and how to paint the figure. Thanks so much for watching, and keep on painting.